set up. Let's see, got it. Okay, recording's in progress. Just to introduce kind of Brad and my partnership a little bit. He first approached me, it was the very end of 2019, about narrating The Fringe Candidate for him. And it was something that was kind of right up my alley for kind of things I like to narrate, though I like all kinds of things. But anyway, and then a few months later, he sent out an email to his people on his email list saying, "Hey, what do you want me to write about?" And I replied and said, "Hey, I want to, write something that I can narrate." And from there, we started doing some live readings of some of his works, the Zach Bates Eco Adventure series, and I've narrated that series for him. He's got it there. I've got it here. But and Michaela McDonald, I think it's Michaela Rose is your pen name. I'm actually narrating her book Absalom right now, her very long book. It's going to be the longest book longest individual book I've narrated yet. But Brad and I have enjoyed kind of picking each other's brains and trying some new things to get people excited about reading, and also to get our feet more wet or whatever, jump in more into the audiobook field. And I've got now over 60 titles under my belt that I've narrated. I do it full time, and I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. I've been doing it for 3 years now, and I quit my day job I've been doing it for 3.5 years now, and I quit my day job about 1.5 years ago. So it's fun.
Yeah, very good. So some of you probably know each other. I know several of you know each other, at least through the Facebook Visionary Fiction Authors Group itself. And again, do you want to give kind of an overview, Ben, before we open it up for the Q&As? We got a bunch of questions that you all have already submitted that we can work off of as well. But again, mostly we just want to make sure you come away having been served and that this was of value to you yourself.
Okay, so as far as the Q&A, I actually didn't bring up the questions yet. I can bring that up, or you can ask me if you have them in front of you. Okay. But just an overall rundown. So I am an independent contractor. Most narrators are. There's a few different options that you can use to get your books narrated. The main one that people use is ACX, which is kind of the back end of Audible. It's owned by Amazon, Jeff Bezos, all that, Anyway, but that's how I got my start, and it's still where I do most of my work through. There's also Findaway Voices that, due to some kind of shady dealings with ACX, that some people are jumping ship and going there. I haven't personally experienced anything horrible with ACX, but to let you guys know from the narrator end of things, there's about 1,500 books that are always up for audition there. And of those 1,500 books, I would guess probably half of them are honestly scams that people are trying to get a narrator to read for them and make a buck off of, that they just copied and pasted something from somewhere else. So that's part of the reason why ACX has kind of been a little bad taste in some people's mouths. But anybody who's narrated a bit can spot the scam titles really quick. So I've been fortunate enough that I've never had to deal with any of that. But anyway, do we want to go ahead with the questions?
Yeah, I was looking at the questions, and again, these are just the starting ones. There may be others that come up.
Yeah, if anyone has anything you have a burning question about, raise your hand either physically or digitally, and we'll get with you too.
Yeah. So obviously, I think we all know how to raise our hands physically, but if you're not on video, that won't help. The way you raise it digitally is down at the bottom. There'll be an area called reactions. If you press that, it'll bring up several choices, and the biggest one is raise hand. So I'm going to raise my hand, and that's what you'll see. And then either I can lower your hand or you can lower your hand once you get called on. So what I was saying is that there's quite a few of the questions was about, if you wanted to narrate your own. So we want to cover those. And then there was those, kind of more the logistics and the contractual and all that. So I think that may be the best place to start. So one of the questions that was sent in was, as an author of a 300-page book, what are the different cost models? How much paid upfront versus initial sales to have an audio produced? So that's the question, and then we can kind of embellish on that as to kind of what are the different typical business models, for a narrator and author.
So for a 300-page book, I have no idea because I don't know how big the print is. When it comes to narrating, we do it, and ACX, everybody who does audiobooks, they're going to do it based on either per word or per finished hour. Most of them will do per finished hour. I've done one where they did per word and it worked out to about the same. But so for a 300-page book, say, I mean, it could be 24 point font or 12. So who knows exactly what it is, but say it was basically an hour of audio is about 9,300 words. So for 100,000 word book, that's going to be a little over 10 hours. It'll be right about 10 hours, probably 10 and a half or so. But so the different models that there's a paid finished hour, which is, so if you're hiring a narrator and not doing it yourself, then the going rate for professional narrators starts at about $225 paid finished hour. So if you have that 10-hour book, it's going to be about $2.25 to $2.5 grand to get that narrated for you. That's for the straight paid finished hour thing. Now ACX, you can, and you'll get all kinds of things. I've listened to audiobooks of authors who have said this is how you get your audiobook, and some of them will say, oh, you can get your audiobook done for nothing, which essentially you can, but you partially get what you pay for. I started out and my first several projects were nothing but straight royalty share. But when you're putting something up for audition on ACX, and when it's just royalty share, unless you already have some enormous following that you can prove, you're going to get narrators who are brand new. You're going to get narrators who are just getting their feet in the water. And I'm not saying don't ever go with them. I'm glad somebody did with me, but I don't do that anymore because it ends up that you make, $10 on something that you put 100 hours into. So essentially, there are authors out there who are saying, well, you should just hire a volunteer narrator, and you can make your own decisions there. But honestly, what I do most of my stuff as, and I've done this with Brad, and I'm doing this with Michaela also, is a hybrid program. Pardon me, I need some water. Or kombucha. Hang on just a second.
While he's getting a drink, his family's recovering from some intestinal issues, so he's in isolation to try not to come down with it.
Got it. Okay, so the hybrid program is where the narrator, like on Findaway in particular, they just came out, I think, a little over a year ago with doing their own version of it, which is formally through them, and they take whatever the narrator's paid finished hour rate is, and they cut it by half, and then you split the royalties with them on the sales of any audiobooks. And that's what I do with people now. So my going rate right now is $250 paid finished hour, but for a new author who I work with, who wants to do a royalty share deal, then they'd be paying me 125 per finished hour, and then we'd split the royalties on the audiobook sales.
And let me mention something else again, because I'm going to be listening and coming from kind of the author's perspective, and obviously, Ben's coming from the narrator perspective. So we want to be able to offer both. So here's why you might want to work with radio revenue share through ACX with a new narrator. It gives you the opportunity to kind of get into the realm of, audiobook production and what that takes, and, the back and forthness of that. It also gives a new narrator the opportunity to, start to get known, start to get some things out there that, samples that he can put on his ACX to attract new authors. And so you kind of both kind of working together, to get into this growing area of, book production. One of the other things that I've offered, just because I want to be as fair and equitable, and at the same time look at, my own pocketbook, is where I do a revenue share with a fairly new audiobook narrator, but also give them a bonus up at the front end and possibly at the back end. Now, it's not a large bonus. Usually, I think is around, I said like 150, something like that. But that way, again, you're giving them something rather than it just being 100% revenue share. And at the same time, you're not, breaking your own bank, as you get started. So again, there's certain structured ways that they are, like, what ACX has and all. But you can get kind of creative, with your offerings as well. I've had some great working experience, relationships with Ben and also with Meg Price, both of which Ben was a little bit further along. He was just getting ready to go, full time. Meg was fairly new in her, narrating, and both of them have worked out great. I think it worked out, for them okay, and it's worked out okay with me. And, we got quite a few books out on audiobook that way. Okay, so any questions or, well, how about this, or anything like that related to that part of it? Just raise one of your hands.
Or we can probably just talk. Ben, so you said $250 an hour. What would a new narrator charge? What's a reasonable rate for a base rate?
It kind of depends. I started out, and my first paid finished hour gig that I took was $100 paid finished hour. And when I did that, I was all excited about it, and I posted on a few places, and some narrators were like, you're killing the market here. And I can see that, but it's also something where it's a matter of somebody is going to narrate at that rate. You can get like the level, there are different levels that you can put your book on ACX for audition. And so like the lowest paid finished hour rate is $50 to $100. And which, if you're paying your narrator $50 an hour, you're paying them less than minimum wage. Because for an hour of finished audio, you're looking at 4 hours of work at least. And it varies. Honestly, for a newer narrator, they're probably going to be closer to 6 to 8 hours per 1 hour of work. But it's something where I don't think there's a wrong way to get into it. I do think that it's not worth my time to be doing straight royalty share anymore. But for a newer narrator, you'll find some who will do it for 100 paid finished hour. So for that 100,000, for that 10-hour book, it'd be $1,000. But my goal as a narrator with anyone, and I don't have that many authors who are there yet, other than ones who have just selected to do straight paid finished hour to begin with. But my goal is for any author who I work with, for it to make sense for them to want to do the paid finished hour. Like my best-selling author she's still not doing straight paid finished hour with me. It's a matter of it's the Jane Austen's Dragon series, which is it's kind of my cash cow, honestly. But it's something where it would make complete sense for her to pay me just straight paid finished hour, because at this point I'm making much more than I normally would from her series because of the royalty share. And ultimately, if you're going to sell 10,000 audiobooks, it's going to make a lot more sense to pay your narrator just this much up front rather than, $2 for every audiobook. So that's kind of where I'm at is my goal is to, and I like working with newer authors because I know I'm still on the beginning end of my journey, but I also like helping people who are on the beginning end of their journey to be able to get exposure. And I have some books that I've made, $50 off of, and that's it so far. But I have others that I'm in the, I've made $5,000 in royalties off of it. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Hey, go ahead.
One other thing, that the difference between Findaway and ACX, I don't know if anybody else read the thing that Brad initially sent out with the invitation to this. There's somebody who gave a pretty good breakdown of the differences of them, and I agreed with most of it. But so ACX is Audible, and Audible is the lion's share of audiobook listeners. There are others. There's Scribd. There's any number of other different outlets out there, but Audible is the lion's share. They get like 50% of all audiobook listeners listen to Audible. And ACX only gets your material on Audible, but it gets it on Audible. With Findaway, they get it on Audible. You get a smaller, so if you're selling your audiobook through Audible, they take 60% of the revenue and they give the royalty of 40% of the revenue. So if it's $10, you're going to get $4. And if you're doing a royalty share split, it'll be $2 to you and $2 to your narrator. Now, that's when you do an exclusive ACX contract. If you go through Findaway, then you get 25% royalty instead of the 40% royalty through Audible. And I'm not sure, they have a different amount for each service that they use. But with Findaway, you also get your books in libraries, in all kinds of things. So it's kind of either or.
The other factor, and I don't know if this may be changing, you can comment on this. ACX, if you sign up for ACX, they're asking for a 7-year, I believe, exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had some authors say that they have gone back to ACX and requested to get out of that contract.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I've done that with one book myself, and they said, okay, but
Mm-hmm.
they don't have to. They can say, no.
Yeah.
So, we said 7 years, 7 years it is. So you just need to kind of factor that into it as well.
Well, and that's the other thing. So on the royalty share thing with ACX, when you sign that contract, if it's a royalty share or a royalty share hybrid deal, you're going to be splitting those royalties for that 7 years with the narrator. Once that 7 years is done, then I'm paid for, or whatever narrator. Now, that's the idea, is that in that 7 years, your book had better sell enough so that I'm getting compensated. And it's also in my interest as a narrator on those to try and promote them, which I do with Brad, which I do with anybody who I work with. And honestly, whether I get paid royalty share or just straight paid finished hour, I like promoting the work that I do. So that's kind of a little bit of a whichever. I just like being involved with my authors and with listeners, readers, whatever you want to call them. So.
Yeah, good. One of the other questions that came in, how do you pick a narrator? A problem with a trial chapter is they don't bring the same enthusiasm to the book. That might be an issue. So I'll just share, to start with how I initially picked my narrator. I did it through ACX. I knew nothing about ACX other than somebody told me, well, if you're interested in audiobook production, go to ACX. That was it. So I did a lot of time, on ACX. But, one of the things that ACX does have is a very strong pool of narrators and I would say a sophisticated, selection system where you can search and say, this is what I want. Show me all the, narrators who only do revenue share. Show me the narrators who will consider, both. You can really filter down to them. And once I had kind of said, these are the criteria I looked at, there was a list of them, and then I just started listening to their samples. And I think the reason I picked Meg Price for the first book she and I did was she had one of her samples was a passage from Alice in Wonderland. Well, Alice in Wonderland is one of my favorite childhood books. Also, the book that I was writing had some scenes, related to Alice in Wonderland. So I thought, sounds like a good match. And I just loved her voice because she has a very live, engaging voice, even when she's just, narrating the story, not using all her different, voices itself. So that's the process that I went through, kind of listening for, how would my book sound coming through her voice and all her different, ramifications itself. How about for you, Ben?
Well, I'm wondering, did you find me through ACX for a fringe candidate? Because you just reached out to me. I don't even remember where, but it wasn't through ACX. I think I just got an email from you. So I'm wondering.
I think it was a combination of things. I think I had somebody else who mentioned that they were having their book done by this guy named, Ben Fife. And then I went on to ACX and looked up Ben Fife, and there you were. And it was a combination of those two things that initiated it.
Okay. Well, regarding the question of, the trial chapter and whatever, it's something where if they're not bringing the same enthusiasm to your book that the trial chapter did, I would back out of the contract. And you through ACX, there's a way you can do that. The trial chapter, your initial audition is not the trial chapter. So your audition is an ideal audition is a bit from basically about 3 pages, and you're going to get some dialogue, and you're going to get some just plain narrative, and you're going to get it from a couple of different places in the book, like maybe one that's more calm and maybe one that's action, so that you can get a real idea of what the narrator can do. It's also something where I always think the more information you can provide to a narrator, the better. Like the amount of titles that are listed on ACX that have like jack squat in the comments and whatever, it makes a narrator go, this is probably a scam. That's really part of what is a red flag. But yeah, when you hear auditions, you want to hear if you're putting it up for audition and not just reaching out to a specific narrator, then you want to get as many auditions as you can, but you also don't want to get inundated with them. I mean, I've gotten books where I was one of 170 that auditioned for it, and I've also gotten books that I was the only person who auditioned for it, or one of like 3. But if somebody is not bringing the same enthusiasm and energy, then my first thing would be just communicate to them and say, this needs to happen. And if you're met with resistance, I would pull out of the contract, and I would get a different narrator.
Yeah. Good points. Here's a good question. How well does your book or books have to be selling for a narrator to agree on a profit splitting versus a lump sum that that may never be regained?
Mhm. That's a really good question. And there's not a perfect answer to it because it's really hard to tell. Um, Basically, I've heard it said that, for every 10 physical or Kindle or for every 10 other kinds of books that you sell, you'll sell one uh, audiobook. It's also something where 1 in 5 people right now are listening to audiobooks regularly. So it's who knows. But on the overall amount, so when I'm looking for something to audition for, I I every once in a while I'll pull up just the straight royalty share to see if there's something that's rather engaging. But usually people who have a bestseller, they're not going to want to do just straight royalty shares. So to make it something that's going to be profitable for an author, um, you look at how it's selling on Amazon, and anything that is placed above like 250,000 top seller is not going to make a return for the author, for the narrator, that will make it worth doing. So if it's under 100,000, that's a pretty good bet that it's over the course of 7 years at least, they'll recoup their investment. If it's below 10,000, then the author really shouldn't be putting it up for royalty share. They should be putting it up for paid finished hour. But if somebody wants to, take one that's in the top 10,000 sellers and pay me royalty share for it, I'd do it.
Good points. All right. So before we shift to what if I want to narrate my own, because we got quite a few good questions there as well. Anybody else have a questions they want to ask related to having how to, reach a narrator and all that? Cynthia.
I basically want to know what your process is. Can you share that?
Sure. Which part of the process or the entire process? What?
Okay. As a creator on YouTube, I would have to go through and, do my script. And then I'd go through and do my script. And I'd go through and I'd edit out the oops of my scripts, that sort of thing. Or is that what you're looking at to make up that hour or 4 hours of that 1 hour that you work?
So what for my personal workflow, I guess, when I get the book from the author, I love having physical versions, but that's partially because I like being able to talk about it with my wife, and she's much more apt to read it if I can hand it to her and say, "Oh yeah, this part." But when I get the book, I listen to it. Actually, I play it as an audiobook. I do a text to speech thing, and with it, the monotony of the computer reading it, I definitely follow along. But that way, I don't fall asleep while I'm reading, because honestly, I'm a little narcoleptic. But by doing that, then I have the PDF or the Word file or whatever, and then I can make notes as I'm listening through it, and I can, if it's fairly straightforward and whatever, sometimes I'll honestly be doing something else while I'll do it. But sometimes when that happens, I have to go back and I read through it again. By the time this is skipping ahead, but by the time I've gone through the whole process, I've probably read through the book in one way or another at least 4 times. But so that's my initial thing is just reading through the whole book, making notes on characters, making notes on weird words, name places, whatever. And then from there, after that initial, usually I'm reading the book that I'm going to narrate like 2 weeks before I narrate it, because I'm narrating something else that night. So then when I get to narrating it, then I'll review like the chapters that I'm probably going to record that night. And I do the same thing again. I just listen to it with it there. There are some narrators who will like just completely doctor up the script with, highlighting colors for each different character and whatever. I don't do that. It's Positron is one that is very good for helping with things like that. I haven't used it, but I had a conference call with the guy who's the developer for it, and it's a very good program, and I probably will eventually use it, but it's also dough and I've got 6 kids and mortgage payment and whatever, and so so then I'll listen through the chapters that I'm gonna record that night. Sometimes I'll actually listen to the chapter and then I'll record the chapter and then I'll listen to the next chapter and record the next chapter. And then after that, so the recording process, I mean, as I'm going through, if I make a mistake, I do punch and roll recording. Actually, I kind of do a hybrid of punch and roll and other, which punch and roll means if you make a mistake, you stop it, you back it up and you pop back in again. So essentially, I'm doing the editing there as I go, but
Okay.
I don't entirely do that. Sometimes if I'm not sure, if I can't decide which way I want to say a line, sometimes I'll do it like 2 or 3 times. And then in the editing process later, that's when I'll go, okay, this is the one that I want to go with. So then after the recording process, then the next day or sometimes the next week, depending on what's going on, I'll get to the editing process. And then I have, again, the manuscript up. I have the Adobe Audition thing up, which there are all kinds of different DAW, digital audio workbase, I don't know. So anyway, there are all kinds of different ones. I used Audacity for a long time. I've been using Audition now for just a couple of months, and I really like Adobe Audition now that I'm using it. But anyway, that's where I'm doing the mastering. I'm reducing breaths. I don't eliminate breaths. There are some people in the audiobook community who are like, I don't hear breaths at all, but it's not natural. When you listen to an audiobook with no breaths, it sounds weird. It sounds more like text to speech instead of a performance, because you breathe in reality. But anyway, but reducing noises. I mean, like anytime you speak, all kinds of mouth clicks and whatever, and those have got to be taken out. And editing is honestly the longest part of the process. I'm to the point where I can get my editing done probably about 10 times faster than I could when I started, but you learn tricks along the way. So then after the editing and I mastering and whatever, then I upload it and I'm good to go. And then the next step is the author or rights holder, whatever, listens to it, hopefully. And because in 100,000, it's no different than writing, that you're going to miss an error here or there. So I don't like it when I've worked with authors or publishers who just, oh, you're done, stamps it and sends it off on their way, which I don't make that many mistakes, but I know that there's got to be something that I did that needs to be fixed that I didn't catch. So then they get me back their corrections and whatever, and I plug those in, and then we're good to go.
Okay. How do you handle, okay, like I write a main female character and you're definitely not female. Do you make a voice alteration for that or not?
I just do it with my voice.
Okay.
I don't, well, there's different camps in the audiobook narration side of things. I read one thing where a guy was like, I have no idea why he listens to audiobooks, because he said the main problem with narrators is they think they're voice actors. It's like, they are. it is. He's like, they should just read it. And if I just wanted to read something, I'd listen to text to speech, and that's what I told the guy. But anyway, for me, I mean, I do everything from Jane Austen's Dragons, so I'm doing Elizabeth Bennet, and so it's I do a higher British accent, and well, I do a higher voice, and with a little breathier and things like that. And then I do all the way down to dragons, where I will eat anyone who disturbs my keep. And then there's also fairy dragons, who there's April, who I'm cold. And with the dragons in Jane Austen's Dragons, that's my initial recording, but then I take it to another level and I add effects to that too. So with Longborn being the dragon who will eat anyone who disturbs my keep, then I slow him down 7%. So then it's even lower and a little boomier. And with April, I speed it up 30%. So it's because she's a fairy dragon. But so that's I love doing that series. It's fun. I'm going to be doing the 8th one in another month or two here.
Thank you for explaining that to me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I want to let Mary ask her question. I also want to mention, I put in the chat, there's an app called Voice Stream that I've been using for quite a while. I love listening to books. I hardly won't even read a book if I can't also listen to it while I'm reading it. Voice Stream does a pretty credible job, not nearly as good as, a good audio book narrator like Ben. But, if you want to be listening to your own book as you're writing it, Voice Stream is a good choice. It's available on both Android phones and iPhone as well. So Mary, what was your question?
Okay. Well, my question was, I write historical fantasy, and I have a lot of historical foreign language words, things like that. How much back and forth could I get with a narrator, like to make sure that they get the word pronounced right? Because when I do on voice to, on text to speech, I can get some really crazy pronunciations that are not even near.
So what I would do, and what I have done, actually I did with Michaela, with this book, and it's a request that I've had. Like I did a couple of books that's the Way of Aloha series that has a bunch of Hawaiian words in it, and I mean and he lived in Hawaii for 2 years and he's been studying it for years and years. But anyway, just to make sure that we get it right, he records, or Michaela recorded all her proper names in there and just sends it to me, and then I can listen to them over and over again. And now if you have if you have like extensive foreign language stuff in it, I would be looking for a narrator who at least is, semi-conversational in that language. I have done, I narrated one book that had 2 paragraphs in French, and I didn't know it had paragraphs in French when I auditioned for it. And this was honestly at the first end of the beginning of the thing, where I didn't faithfully read through everything beforehand. Now I do, but fortunately I have a father-in-law who speaks French, so I had him just read it for me, and I just copied what he said verbatim. But it is something where, especially in fantasy and science fiction, when there's different names and things that are obviously not, run of the mill, like Corona Direct and whatever, I've had all kinds of funky things that I've had to learn to say. And the longest word I've ever said is actually, Michaela put this in her book, which it's floxinosinylapilification.
That's a good one.
And it's the way it's used in the book. It's a word that means, this is useless. And essentially somebody who likes a really long word created that word to mean whatever this is useless. But I had, there it is, floxinosinylapilification. Yep, that's it. That's good. I can remember it because I listened to it about 5. There's a, and for if you're going to narrate your own book, there are all kinds of great resources. The main one that I use all the time is youglish.com, which it scours hundreds of thousands of YouTube videos and gets people pronouncing all kinds of words. And I found floxinosinylapilification, whatever. I found that on there, and I practiced it a few times and I got it out. So
make sure we have time to go into some of the other questions about if you wanted, you're thinking about doing your own book and you're recording your own book. So let's kind of move over to that. And if we have time, we can just open it up again.
Mhm.
So one of the questions was, is there any good voice exercises to do before reading a script, kind of warm up your voice? How do you warm up your voice? How do you do that?
There's all kinds of different warm-ups you can do. The main thing, honestly, I do every time is just a yawn sigh, which if you've ever taken a voice lessons at all, that's one of the first things they do is like, oh, oh. And if you listen to voice lessons, they're the funniest thing to listen to. We used to have a music store, so but a good voice teacher can teach you all kinds of things. But the thing with the yawn sigh is it loosens everything up, and it also heals. Like I do that when I'm done narrating too. And like especially when there's like an old character who there are things that it's not the best for your vocal cords. But if you afterwards, then when you do that, oh, then it relaxes it. And I drink tea and whatever. And so, yeah, there are definitely good vocal exercises. You can Google them. You can hire a voice coach, whatever.
Well, that was perfect lead into the next question is it worth hiring a voice coach? And if so, how do you go about finding a good one?
You can do all kinds of Skype lessons now and whatever, but you could also check with a local music store. There's usually voice teachers there's voice teachers everywhere. But just like there's piano teachers, there's voice teachers. And I'm not currently taking voice lessons. I have in the past. But my wife is also a voice teacher. So I kind of, there are times when she's like, okay, get it off you're sounding a little gravelly now. I'm like, oh, I'm like, okay, yeah. So but it's handy to have a live-in voice coach.
Yeah, I would think so. Okay. Questions about how do you keep the characters separate without sounding phony?
Mm-hmm. And it's a skill. It's something where there are, I mentioned positron. That's one that they have a specific tool for that like they just, you take a sample from each character as you go through. I haven't so much done that, but I will sometimes if a character comes back from earlier in the book, I'll go back and I'll listen to what I did before. That again goes into that 4+ hours of preparation for 1 hour of audio. With the other thing that I like to do with authors, especially if it's a really big cast, is I like having them take an Excel file or something and say, okay, if I were to have this as a movie, this is who would play this character. And if you have like specific YouTube examples of what you want them to sound like, that's even better. Now, I also do a big caveat of I'm not going to outright do impressions of people, because I'm me. If you're hiring me, you're going to get my performance. But it's a good place to start from. And it's also something where when you're thinking about the characterization of a person, there's all kinds of different things. There's how old are they? What gender are they? Where are they from? What's their socioeconomic background? Are they skinny? Are they muscular? Are they overweight? And you assume that role. So like with Michaela's, there's a character who he's a councilman who he's Oliver, and he's essentially Vernon Dursley. But he's overweight, and so I let my jowls kind of become activated then, but it's a matter of just getting into the character for each person. And it is I watched a video of a guy who he's a very good voice actor, he's a very good voiceover guy, but he recommended that if you're going to do an audiobook or anything, that you never just read through it, that you do all of this character and then all of this character and then all of this character and plug it all in. And that would be a complete nightmare for me. I mean, you'd be looking at adding a dozen hours for an hour. But if it works for him, that's great. But it's something that takes practice. So
clearly there's at least two different ways to approach that itself.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. He's a great voice actor, but he doesn't do many audiobooks. So he's
that may be why.
Yeah. It's like if you're doing anime, then that makes complete sense. If you're voicing different characters too, you'll be plugging in different ones. But when you're doing an audiobook, you don't want to record the audiobook 6 times or 67 or whatever.
Couple other fairly quick ones here. How do you keep your voice even throughout the book?
Part of it is you're not going to. You can, I mean, it really is a matter of, I can count on having a couple of days a month where I have some kind of cold or something. And eventually I'm like, okay, I can't. There are days when I have gone in, I've recorded a couple of chapters, and then the next day I go to edit it and I'm like, nope, that's gone. And it doesn't happen often, but it's happened a couple of times. But it's also been good for me to recognize that, okay, this is not the quality that I want it to be. It is something where, especially when I go back and do the edits, you need to listen to what you're replacing so that your voice is the same pitch, because a character will, like, I may start at the beginning of the book and have him more high pitched, and by the end of the book he might sound significantly different, but it's just kind of having a continual flow. So not taking how he is at the end of the book and then when I make a correction, putting that in. It's listening to exactly what it was then. So it's more for the night, or that I do my recording at night. That's why I say night all the time. But being consistent through at least the recording session and referring to your other stuff as needed.
And of course, I think you can start to get an appreciation of what Ben was talking about before, that the editing process, that's where a lot of the time comes in, is going back and cleaning that up and making sure that the voice level stays the same and all that. What's the most important equipment if setting up a studio at home?
So I'll take my camera off and kind of show you what I've got here. So here's my mic. It's a Shure SM7B. Mics, there's all kinds of different mics you can use. I started with a USB mic that was a piece of crap, and I recorded my first half dozen books, I think, with it. Maybe not quite that many, but close to that many. Then I got, and so other things in here. So I have my soundproofing, and I have this is my, let's see, okay, you can almost see it. So there's my Focusrite 2i2, and that is what my mic goes into, and then that goes to my computer. If you're going to be recording an audiobook and you want it to sound decent, you're going to not want to do it with a USB mic. You get all kinds of feedback. You have to process all kinds of stuff after the fact, and you can get it to where it'll pass ACX standards, obviously, because that's what I did with my first few books. But if you listen to the first books that I did, and if you listen to the books I'm doing now, you'll hear a significant difference. So that's the main thing. You just need a computer that you can have a digital audio workface in, the analog interface, and a XLR microphone. The other one that I've used extensively was the MXL 770. I'm actually thinking about getting that one back out because I like it too. And I'd like to be able to compare the two that I've got right now. But there's so many, there's all kinds of tech heads and whatever and audiophile guys who can tell you better than I could. You got a question, Mary?
Yeah, I have a Yeti because I had thought that I would do that at one point. What's your thought on a Yeti? I think they're pretty good.
You know, is it a USB mic
I
or is
don't
it
think so.
okay? So it
No.
doesn't plug right into the computer.
No, it does not.
Okay, then it's probably fine.
Mhm.
Yeti is a decent mic brand. I'm not a big tech guy. I kind of research what I think is going to work for me, and I let people kind of do their own there. But
Mhm.
I've seen people who are comfortable with the Yeti. So
Mhm.
Let me insert one other question here that Jenna had posted. Is there, what distribution place or places come second to Audible? What would be other places you want to make sure that the book is being distributed through?
So if you're doing Findaway, they cover those other ones. They cover Chirp and Scribd. But again, I have not used Findaway directly myself until one that I am doing. That it's the next book I'm going to narrate. And that one, well, it's one of the next ones. I have like 5 lined up. But I've had ones where the author has had me send them the files and then they've taken them to Findaway. But that's the thing. I don't know how well things sell on those other ones because I haven't done anything directly through Findaway. This will be my first one that will be a royalty share hybrid deal with Findaway. So I could let you know after the fact how those other ones sell. But I can tell you that the ones I've done on ACX, I've been able to promote like the audiobook giveaway codes that you get, and I've gotten a lot of really good reviews from it. That's one thing that if you're going to be doing audiobooks, you want reviews from people who actually will review the audio aspect of it. So,
and I do know that one of the other outlets that's becoming more a player is, Google, Google Play Books, both ebooks and Audible.
And I believe Findaway distributes to them too.
Yeah, yeah, we do. Yeah. Okay. This is okay. Well, real quick. Might a memory foam mattress cover work to soundproof walls?
A memory foam? Yeah, actually, I have some. Well, like the egg crate kind of foam stuff.
I think that's what you're talking about. Yeah.
You want it to have some kind of texture to it, because what it is, when you have something that's flat, you have it. You're going to get echoes. You're going to get reverberation from things. You want your sound to be as dead as possible. That's basically when they call it room tone. When you're not breathing, you're not doing anything, you just hear what the room sounds like, and you'll hear every mic is going to have a little bit of its own sound feedback and whatever, and that will be in that. But yeah.
One last question, then Ben and I'd like to share one other thing with you that some of you might be interested in, that we're in the process of creating. What are ways that you can save time when reading, and things to think about while reading that will make the editing easier later on? Any last minute tips on that process?
And that's one that it takes practice. I mean, what got me interested in narrating audiobooks in the first place was reading to my kids every night for years and years. I got performing more and more, and it was just fun. And but narrating an audiobook is a little bit different, because with my kids, I'd flub something, I'd just read it again, or I'd skip it or whatever. Or if I came to the the French in Jane Eyre, I just was like, skip it. I can't do that if I come to a French line in an audiobook. I have to say everything that the author wrote. And I have to say it so that people can understand it. One of the main things that I would advise is, when you're narrating, just slow down, relax. Like as I've been talking to you guys, I've been pretty. I'm a rather energetic guy one way or the other anyway. But it's a matter of when I'm narrating and when it's a really good recording session, when I'm done, I feel so good. um, and it's a cathartic thing. But I talked about the mouth noises in particular. One thing to practice is not closing your mouth at the end of a sentence, because if you don't close your mouth, you get less mouth noise. And also learning not to second guess yourself so much. So they're at the same time, if you know you made a mistake, you need to fix it. But it's also something where as you get into it, as it's flowing, it's just really good to keep going. So.
Okay, very great. I'm going to put my email address in the chat here. So first off, thank you everybody for coming here and, posting your questions originally and the additional questions and all that. I hope this was of some value to you. One of the things that
there's mine too.
that Ben and I have been doing with great fun was started off as the Zach Bates Eco Adventure Read-Ups, and then we added the guest author read-ups, where once a month and sometimes twice a month there for a while, we were doing Zoom calls where we're reading sections of either my books, the Zach Bates series, or another author's books, particularly focusing to kids and their families and their parents. And we're in the kind of a process of what you could kind of say generating read-ups 2.0, but with a little different slant. We really want to see if we can't collaborate and bring indie authors together with indie bookstores. And I want to give Ben, I know he's been using his voice up quite a bit here, but I'm going to let him use it just a little bit longer to elaborate on what this looks like and what the next step would be.
So would you like me to read the thing I wrote up?
Why don't you? Yeah, that's
Okay.
simplest
Let me
thing to
track it down
do.
here.
Because you're
Okay.
great at reading.
Okay. Are you an independent author? When was the last time you visited an independent bookstore? Or are you an independent bookstore who wants more traffic in your store, virtual or in person? I'm Benjamin Fife, and together with author Brad Swift, we've been doing regular live readings to encourage kids, young and old, to get back into the joy of reading. We're looking to take our events to the next level. We've featured some of Brad's books, as well as others from authors across the country. In December 2020, we even did a 3-night live reading of A Christmas Carol. Our events have reached hundreds of people across the country, but it has the potential of going viral. We want to be in your local bookstore, and we want to bring bookstores, authors, readers, and narrators together. We aren't competition, we're compatriots. If you are interested in joining our team and taking our Read Up events to a new level, we'd love to have you on board. Can we count you in?
Okay, so this is very much in the process of being created and being elaborated on probably. On October the 20th, we will be doing a special Zoom call with our own team and with people who are wanting to find out what this is all about and actually be part of the collaboration and part of the creation itself. The reason I wanted to include our email addresses is I think everybody we've got here, because you registered, we have a way to reach out to you about this. If this is of interest to you, then we invite you to register. We will be sending out emails to our various network of people to invite them to register for that Zoom call. Absolutely no obligation, no cost, all of that. It's really an opportunity to find out whether you want to be a part of this. But what we envision is having, like for myself, I might have a local bookstore and I would go and do a reading there. So they could invite people here in my area to come to the reading, but also at the same time, have it be telecast virtually, and other bookstores could take part in that as well, virtually itself. So we're creating a network of authors, bookstore owners, independent bookstore owners, and in some cases we'll have additional special guests. Like we had one, we had a great book done by Teresa Arispe, which included dinosaurs coming to life. And so one of the special guests we had at that read up was a great, fantastic guy who actually had some of the dinosaur fossils in his museum. And so we had him come and share and show the dinosaurs and all that. So a lot that we can do here. But again, the main point is we want to re-energize people to realize that reading can be a choice rather than just, video games or Netflix or all that, to really start to inspire people to start reading again and reading to their families as well.
And essentially what we're wanting it to partially turn into is kind of a meet and greet with an author, only across several bookstores at the same time. That's what we envision it as. And it'll be something where we want it to be hosted at a different bookstore each time. So. Yeah.
And we have our first bookstore. We had advantages because one of the authors that Ben is in the process of narrating her books for happens to just be an indie author and an independent bookstore owner. So we're going to be doing the first one or two, at her place in New York itself. So again, any last questions about that? But again, more information. I'll be sending you out more information. But the next one will be the actual meeting to explore this collaboration will be on October the 20th at 1:30 Eastern time. Yes, Mary, you had a question or comment?
I think maybe you've already answered it for about 2 seconds ago, because I know a local bookstore in my area that's very good with indie authors. However, I think they charge money if you things like that. But is there like a form that I could send to them or present so I'm not going to seem like an idiot?
No, not yet. And then it probably will be. Is that new?
That's something I'll be working on before October 20th. So
Right.
I'm hoping to have that.
I had this author thing for every year for new indie authors. And I think actually about 6 or 7 years ago, one of my first shows was there, but I didn't go back.
Yeah. And this can be, an opportunity. It's like as an indie, author, sometimes it's hard to just go into your indie bookstore and all there is to talk about is, will you, my books. Well, here's another opportunity to say, this is something that we're doing. Would you be interested? I know I'm looking forward to going back to my indie bookstore in the area and presenting this and seeing if they have an interest or not. Yeah. Cynthia?
I don't know if you guys can hear my chickens. I can hear them.
I just had a pack of dogs run by.
Okay.
In our area, where my daughters live, they have a used bookstore that sponsors independent or traditional authors in the, I guess it would be the state. It would be state authors, but it's a used bookstore, even though in this one little area, they have the new books for the new authors in the area.
That's exactly the kind of place we're looking.
Okay,
we're looking
I
for.
just thought I'd toss that out
So.
to you in case you were only looking at, new book independent.
We're looking for people who like to read.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that sounds great. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect idea. Okay. Anything else? Wow. We got to end with just 6 minutes past time. So I thought that was pretty good. Thank you, everybody. Really enjoyed it. And really great to connect with people live like this. And it's not quite the same as being in the same room, but as close as we're going to get here for a while.
Yeah.
And if any of you do have any additional questions or whatever, feel free to email either of us and we'd be happy to get with you, either phone, Zoom, or just chatting back and forth on email or whatever. Anyway.
Well, there is one other question. When is the recording being available? It will be
Tuesday.
available later today. And I'll get it out in the next, let's see, today is Wednesday. Before the end of the day on Friday, we'll get it out to the list. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you,
Thank you
Ben.
so much for doing this.
Ciao, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Live long and prosper.
You too.